real quickly, we have Michael, who comes from California. So he's a real awesome guy. We get to work together on a lot of games projects at Rakuten, and he's going to give us a great talk about the future of mobile development. I'm hoping it's HTML5 based a little bit. And Michael's actually one of the key contributors to HTML5 open source projects, so it's a real treat to have him here. He's presented at Facebook F8 and great conferences like that. So without further ado, Mike.
Thanks a lot, Frank. As Frank alluded to, the title of this talk is The Future of Mobile Development. And then, of course, the rumor end and the tracker end is HTML5. So I think the sophisticated folks in the audience have already put two and two together. But yes, actually, I think the future of mobile is HTML5, but in a kind of nuanced way, which I'll get into. Before I start, though, I'd like to just have a quick show of hands from the audience to know sort of who my audience is. Who here is works in software or builds apps or websites or anything like that? Okay, so we have a very technical audience. And how about people who are involved in designing products? And you could be an engineer and kind of a product designer too, or just a product designer. Anyone here? Hands up. All right, we got a few. And how about people involved in business decisions? Great, we've got a good set of business decision makers. So this talk is for all of you, and it is always a bit of a balance to combine the kind of deeply technical with the business, but I'm going to go ahead and give it a try. So a little bit about my background. Notably, the reason I'm here, I suppose, is my early contributions to HTML5. So I designed the WebSocket specification, and so the HTML5 WebSocket protocol allows browsers to communicate with a server in real time. And so whenever you use applications like chat on Gmail or Facebook or Google Docs for document collaboration or any of these kind of, I call them multiplayer apps, then that's using a protocol that I worked on. And so it seems now it's actually been almost 10 years since I started on that project. And it's really grown in the interim. And now, I mean, there's a billion people who use that every single day. And generally, HTML5 is one of the most used technology platforms on the planet. I'm on the board of directors at Rakuten Games, and so this is a joint venture between Rakuten and Blackstorm, focused on HTML5 and building games for Rakuten. And I'm the CEO at Blackstorm, and we're the post-App Store company. And so that basically means, as I said in the title, the future of mobile development is HTML5. But the twist is it's not necessarily in the typical structure you normally see with apps on the App Store. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. So I'm going to start with just a statement here, which is that it's too hard to build the next Uber today. And by Uber, I mean maybe like the next Lyft or the next Grab. But generally speaking, if you sat out today and said, I want to go build an app that's going to be used by tens of millions of people and be worth billions of dollars, it's not impossible. You might be able to do it, but it was a lot easier 10 years ago, a lot easier. And so building WhatsApp today or building Line Messenger today, it's a disaster. I mean, there already is a Line Messenger. Why would you build another one? 10 years ago, obviously, there's this opportunity. And so the point is that the mobile market is actually quite oversaturated. There's a lot of investment. There's a lot of people competing. And at this point, it's not an emerging platform. The winners have already been chosen. And we know who they are. And there's still a little bit left to see. Like, we don't know yet exactly which regions will be Uber versus Lyft versus Grab or things like that. But we do know it's not going to be someone in this room who starts a new company, most likely. And so the reason I'm here, though, is because there's actually a very subtle shift that has happened this year, in 2017. And it actually changes, it completely changes the context for building applications and how you go to market and how you attract users. And the key to the answer, of course, is HTML5. So we call this the app within an app era. And how it works is this. Instead of building a new email app like Gmail, 4 days ago, or maybe 5 days ago, Google just announced that they have a HTML5 platform embedded inside of Gmail. So this just came out. And so now it means if you want to build, for example, a new CRM, or you want to build like a candidate applicant tracking system, for your interviews or something like that, you can actually build it not as a standalone app. You can build it as a workflow inside of Gmail. And it'll work on a mobile, on mobile, Android and iOS. It'll also work on desktop. And so Google took the kind of extension API that a lot of people were doing in Chrome to extend Gmail's functionality, and they said, let's make this a platform. Then they exposed all of those APIs to JavaScript. And so as a new application developer, instead of writing Objective-C for iOS, or instead of writing Java for Android, what you do is you write some JavaScript and some HTML, and you put together a little HTML5 app. Now, it's a very interesting type of app because it doesn't own the whole screen necessarily, and it doesn't have a home screen icon. It can't necessarily do push notifications. It has a whole new layer, a whole new platform, a whole new set of APIs. And so the way in which people will discover your app, for example, is through some kind of Google-specific distribution, or maybe because you attach a little link on the bottom of every email you send from the app, so it's viral. And then the way that users interact with it, won't be tap the home screen. They'll be already inside of Gmail, and something will say, oh, it seems that, like, for example, this is an airline reservation. Would you like me, the AI assistant, to go ahead and check in for you? And that could be you building the AI assistant, but you got to build it right inside of HTML5. There are many examples of this, which I can talk about. But 2017 is the year that the big shift has happened, where all the major apps have said, okay, we already know what the mobile home screen looks like. We know what the email app is. We know what the ride-sharing app is. We know what the messenger app is. And obviously, it's a bit different per country. But now that we have that layer done, the new layer on top is how we embed new experiences inside of those apps. Now, this has been a long time in coming, because the iPhone launched 10 years ago. And then Apple in 2008 came out with this idea of an app store. And they said, OK, now developers can submit apps to the app store. And so for the first 7 years or so, Apple was completely against this type of development. So they'd say, look, we want to review every aspect of your app. So if Gmail submitted in 2010 and said, hey, Apple, here's the email app, but don't worry, we're going to follow the rules. However, we're going to let thousands of third parties to submit new extensions and updates to our app that we don't necessarily control, and you can't necessarily review. Apple would have been no way. In fact, they did. They said no way to a lot of people. And so they shut down HTML5 entirely, where you couldn't put HTML5 embedded inside of native apps. But in 2017, there was a big shift. And it's actually iOS 11. And I know we all just had the iPhone 8 come out. And some of us are waiting on the iPhone, I don't know, call it, is it X or 10? If anyone knows, tell me. Raise your hand if you think it's the X. OK, I guess it's the 10. I can never stop calling it the X. Anyway, with the iPhone 10 coming out, we have iOS 11. And iOS 11 comes with a new developer terms of service. And what it says is it's the App Store guideline. It has a new section. It's like 4.6 or 7 or something. It's called third-party software. And it says specifically that you can now put HTML5 apps and games embedded inside of other apps. And not only that, you have access to all the native APIs, including in-app purchases. So you can now build an HTML5 experience that can be discovered from within Gmail, or discovered from within Facebook Messenger, or perhaps Line Messenger or WhatsApp, or as all of these platforms start to see the future. Then you can go ahead and embed your experience, and then you also have access to charge people money. And so now you have a complete business platform. You have access to users, you have a way to create an application, and you have a way to charge money. And so in 2017, after this switch happened, it was just announced that the switch would happen in the beginning of summer. And so a lot of folks have been scrambling, a lot of the big players have been scrambling to put together their platforms as it becomes available and ready now with the release of iOS 11. A few examples of this, to go over more with illustrations, is WeChat. In the beginning of the year, WeChat announced the Mini Programs Initiative. And the idea of mini programs is exactly what I'm talking about. It's got kind of this Chinese translation, mini programs, but it's actually just the app within an app model. And in China, WeChat is kind of like Line Messenger here. It's sort of everyone's life. I mean, you live inside WeChat. You open it on average like 30 times a day. It's something like some ridiculous percentage of the country, like 75% of the country uses WeChat every single day. And so you can imagine that instead of the home screen being the place where you start thinking about your workflow, you open WeChat first, and you go to your kind of inbox. And so embedded inside WeChat is the ability to do all sorts of things, like to do travel and like book a doctor, and find a local store, order something online, to play games, to do social networking, dating. All of these experiences now live inside of WeChat. And so a lot of startups, like a lot of new companies, they don't build an app. Like they don't say, okay, we're going to raise some VC funding, we're going to work on a new app and submit it to the App Store. They say, okay, we're going to raise less VC funding, or none, and we're going to make a little HTML5 experience, put it inside of WeChat, and start attracting users immediately. And so the way that you get users is now actually really easy, because as long as you have kind of a useful and viral function, then right off the bat you have people starting to use your product. And so there's all these new startups who say, yeah, we might eventually build an app, but we're not going to do that until we first explore this, as an embedded inside of WeChat experience. And so another one that we are very familiar with is Facebook Instant Games. So who has Facebook Messenger on their phone? Great. So while I'm talking, you feel free. If you open up the app, there's this kind of seemingly hidden tab. It's a top-level tab. There's only like 4 tabs in the app. There's like your conversations, your contacts, a third one that I don't even know, and then there's games. Now, if you tap games, it's the bottom right, open up, you're like, oh, I didn't know there were games in Messenger. And it's because they haven't yet done a big hard launch where they really announce it and highlight it. It's kind of in a soft launch mode right now. But you can see it right now. You can go look at the future. And if you tap that Games tab, it'll pop up with a list of games. And those are all HTML5 experiences by third-party developers that are submitted to Facebook and then included as part of the Messenger experience. And what's interesting about those experiences is Facebook says, OK, we're going to list your game, and when someone taps it, we'll go and hit your servers and download your JavaScript and your HTML and put it right there on the screen and give you full screen access. And then also, they give the developers access to other APIs. For example, if I hit play and I start a game, the game wants to know who my friends are, or wants to know more about the chat room I'm in, or wants the ability to send messages relevant to the game on my behalf, the ability to connect it to a chatbot that can then send me notifications. And so that's all part of the Facebook Instant API. And so as a game developer, instead of thinking about what are the APIs Apple and Google provides, we're kind of past that. We're now thinking, what are the APIs that Facebook provides? And what's so amazing about this is there's no friction at all. You open it up, you tap it. There's a download initially, but there's no install. It's almost instantaneous, and suddenly you're inside of this game. Now, we launched this game kind of in less than a year ago, kind of in soft launch. We've been iterating on it, we've been exploring, the platform's been evolving. We've already had pretty incredible results. Yeah, I don't actually have my numbers here, so I'll just talk a little bit about them. And so we launched in Vietnam. We've launched in a lot of countries. The most recent one we launched in, we did a hard launch and really focused on it, was Vietnam like 2 weeks ago. And within 3 days, we had 1 million users. And by the end of the week, we had 2 million daily active users in Vietnam, which is a significant portion of the entire online population of Vietnam. Before that, we launched in Thailand and had similar experiences. We got to more than 5 million users weekly and 1 million, or 500,000 to 1 million daily within a couple weeks. We launched in the Philippines before that. We got to 10 million monthly active users and 2.5 million daily active users. Zero marketing spend whatsoever. We never spent a penny at all. And then we've done soft launches all around the world, so you can actually access it in Japan or the US or the UK or Taiwan or whatever. There are more than 1 billion users that we have access to. And so the key, though, is how we integrate our game experience into Messenger, because people then open up Messenger and they're like, oh, I want to talk with a friend, and then they might think, maybe I'll play a game with a friend. And so the very specific ways in which we create a UI flow that goes from a chatting experience into a gaming experience is actually very, very important. And then the issue, though, is that's kind of the product flow. How do you make the product sort of make sense? And then we have to use technology to very aggressively make it smooth and look good and feel as good as native. And so here's the thing. When someone taps it, we find that if it takes more than 10 seconds to load, they're just out. They don't want to do it anymore, right? So now we have to immediately have a way that we download a small experience, take over the full screen, and start you playing the game, then incrementally download more that of what you need later. We find different devices have different rendering layers. Like old Androids don't have WebGL, whereas the new iPhones obviously do. And so we have to target WebGL on the new devices. We have to target HTML5 Canvas on older devices, and in some cases we even have a backup mode where we can just we can render out to DOM elements using CSS transitions, which is really obnoxious. But what we did in order to support that is we created a kind of base game engine that has these different render layers, and then on top our game code can be very logical and straightforward. And so once we get that full screen access, though, we now need to create an experience that feels compelling, it feels fun, it feels like a game. And what a lot of people think is, oh, this is a brand new platform, and it is a new platform with access to billions of users, but at the same time it's still on your phone. And you kind of have an expectation for what is a game on a phone supposed to be like. You've already played games off the App Store, games written in Unity that are written in anything from C# to C++ to Java, and are using sort of the most advanced features of your GPU. And so when you have that kind of game, it's a really compelling, fun experience. Then you're suddenly like, okay, now I'm in a little HTML5 window, but the user doesn't know that. What they know is what a game should feel like. And so as developers, we have to create such a compelling experience that people don't realize that they didn't download a native game, they just switch seamlessly into sort of an instant game. Right now, this market, from a business standpoint, we just rolled out ads. So we don't have in-app purchases yet, even though they've been authorized by Apple. But we did put in reward video ads, where if you watch this video, then we'll give you some bonus in the game. And so we did about a 40% rollout, and immediately we're at about $1 million a month revenue, just on our very first game, just on ads. And so we expect in-app purchases to be significantly more. So this isn't sort of the case where you build a little HTML5 game and maybe make 10K across a few years. This is the sort of market we can build a very, very big business on top of a relatively small development team. So the question is, what does this mean as a developer? And by developer, I mean like a company developing an app, not just an engineer. And so there's a few things. The first is that the cycle of innovation, or the cycle of release, the cycle of iteration, is much quicker. Apple, we send them something. So I was building games in 2008, right when the App Store came out. And I remember we submitted in like, I don't remember what it was. We submitted in like February 2009 or something like this. I remember it fairly clearly. And then we waited until February, March, like April, like I don't know what it was, like late April. And then they got back to us and they said, oh, you misused this API. That's why we've spent 3 months not approving your game. Why don't you go ahead and try again? And we resubmitted, and we waited another like 4 weeks. And so we were sitting there like what was our incentive to go really quickly every single day and fix little bugs? We were just sitting there waiting. We don't have any users. We can't until it's released. Now, Apple's gotten a lot better. They've got a huge review team. And so sometimes you can get it as quick as like a day or two, maybe 3 days. Sometimes it's still like a week. But because there's that friction from Apple, the norm in this industry is to have slower development and release cycles. In the gaming industry, often what will happen is it'll be usually a 2-week cycle. And so this is what Facebook Messenger and Facebook do, for example. Every 2 weeks they submit a new release to the App Store. And that's considered really quick and really forward-thinking, really cutting edge. They have all these continuous integration systems that constantly compile the app and make sure that it's ready to go. And that's very, very quick. Now, for us, we can hit a switch and just shift the HTML and JavaScript code instantaneously. And so what that means is we can release 3 or 4 times a day, and we have. And so it completely changes how you think about product development, because what you have to do is instrument your product, look at very specific KPIs, things you're trying to improve, like can we make it more viral, can we make the first session longer, can we get more people through the first time user experience, and you instrument it and you make a release. And then within hours you have back hundreds of thousands or millions or whatever users of data. You can make a change and make another release that afternoon. And it sounds kind of scary, except that what happens now is you can have like a much less sort of serious integration process. You can have very smaller changes. You can allow developers to make little tweaks, have a PM or QA release manager review it, do a quick QA, put it out, and then if you mess it up and you have a bug, you don't have to wait 3 weeks to fix it. And so it's like, oh, well, 100,000 people saw something slightly off, let's just push out a new fix. You have it later that day. Now, as a developer, a lot of engineers are like, oh my God, this is like my worst nightmare. The idea that someone can call me up at 10 p.m., 4 a.m., whatever it is, and be like, hey, let's get a release out. Before I'd be like, look, there's nothing I can do. Apple's not going to review it for a week. Now it's like, nope, out of bed, it's time to go make that release. But it comes with a lot of rewards, which is that you can build really the best app possible. But from a product standpoint, there's something a little more, from a product and business standpoint, there's something more fundamental here. And this is probably the most important aspect of this talk. By being able to embed HTML5 into native apps, and now that that's the new platform, there's this unbundling of distribution and engagement. And so I want to explain that. Distribution is how people find your product. So you make a new chat app, you make a new ride-sharing app, or whatever. How do people discover that? And right now there's a market for like paid user acquisition and getting the app featured or cross-promoting from other apps. But the other problem is then, what is the app? What do people do inside of it? Is it a chat app? Is it a photo sharing app? Is it interesting or fun? Now, before, a new company would have to solve both of these problems. Both, how do I make a good app? and how do I get it in front of millions of people? And so some companies would solve one of them. They'd have some new marketing trick and create some app that millions of people used, but the content or whatever was in there wasn't engaging enough, and so it would peak and die out. And other companies would build like this grand masterpiece where they have some really interesting use case and they make it and it's amazing, but they have no way to attract users or find an audience. And so the app still fails. And so the problem with building companies on the App Store today is that you have to solve these two really big problems, distribution and engagement. So what this shift means though in this market is that we're not going to try to win the distribution war. We're going to say, okay, look, Line Messenger is the winner in Japan. I mean, that's the messaging that people will use. And you know, in certain parts of the world, Grab is the ride-sharing app, and in certain parts of the world, Gmail is the email app. And so we're not going to go compete with that. They won. They have the distribution. But now, instead of trying to go attract those users, let's just solve a different problem. Let's just build a feature. Let's go ahead and just build like the new way that people manage their inbox for hiring candidates or something like that. And if you just build that engagement and you do that well, then it's very much in Gmail's interest to provide you distribution to their entire audience, because now you're improving their app. You're making it easier for their users to get things done. And so what Gmail and what Facebook and all these others are doing is providing a business model where you have payments, you have access to users, you have access to APIs. And so you're going to have all of these companies that by simply solving a simple like product or business use case can go from 0 to hundreds of millions of people really, really quickly. And some of the numbers I talked about earlier, like our Vietnam launch a couple weeks ago, I mean, if you look at the graph, cumulative installs, it's like, hitting 4 or 5 million installs in under 2 weeks without ever having a marketing budget. I mean, you can imagine the nightmare of the back-end services, right? It's like, there's no like, let's try it out with a dozen people, and then maybe go a little bit more. It's like you turn it on, there's 10 million installs 2 weeks later, right? And a couple million active concurrent daily users. So there are like engineering challenges, but from a business standpoint, it's incredible. I mean, there hasn't been an ecosystem like this. It comes maybe once every 10 years. I mean, the web browser was perhaps the first one where suddenly you could put apps right inside of, like at the time Internet Explorer and Netscape. And then for a little bit, the App Store before it became mature. And so, of course, this will also become mature over time, except there's an opportunity right now. Now, in order to be really good at this, we have to be really good at HTML5. And HTML5 used to be thought of, I mean, I should just answer the question, like, what is HTML5? And there's sort of two ways that I will talk about this. One is from a very technical standpoint. HTML5 is a specification that dictates how elements can be laid out on a screen and how they can be interacted with by the user and programmed by the developer. So it's HTML, CSS, JavaScript, it's a whole set of things. But the HTML5 spec itself focuses specifically on how is it that the application developers can use all these APIs to kind of create an experience. I mean, it has everything you can imagine in it, from a way to render to the screen, like OpenGL versus Canvas 2D versus the DOM. It has touch inputs, multi-touch, and you can track all the fingers. It has WebSocket, you can do real-time communication. It has a lot of these things. But more importantly, HTML5, as opposed to just HTML, as opposed to the original idea of a browser, is just the codification of the idea that the browser is an application delivery platform. And so HTML5 embodies that idea that this is an application delivery platform, and it's an on-demand application delivery platform, and here's how you do it. Now, what's nice about it, what's great about it, is it has seamless and frictionless experience across all devices. So you can program it once, you can put it on Android, you can put it on iOS, you can put it on desktop, you can put it on a watch, on a console, I mean, you can put it basically everywhere. And then lastly, as we talked about, you always control the application from your own server, so you can always update it kind of instantly. Now, with this in mind, developers have to think about it as, what is the HTML5 spec? What are the libraries on top? Are they using React.js, for example, to create a great UI experience? Or you're using something more fundamental, sort of in how you structure your application. At the end of the day, there's hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, in fact, probably hundreds of thousands of JavaScript libraries and a crazy ecosystem out there. That's all now kind of HTML5. And then from the business side, it's how you think about that interaction between the discovery of the application and where it can be embedded. And so the architecture of how this looks, here's an example inside of Messenger, not just for gaming, this is for table booking. For table booking, so they have other platforms besides just gaming, but this is OpenTable. So OpenTable is an existing app. And now Messenger has a little thing that pops up when you want to compose a message and says, oh, do you want to send a table reservation instead? So I could be chatting with my friend Tom and say, hey, let's go to dinner, and I can open up this table reservation and send it to him right there. Now OpenTable, they have an app, they have a website, but now they can attract users right here through this seamless experience. But Facebook controls the UI where there's the button. When someone taps it, then OpenTable controls this little pane where they can use HTML5 to kind of render whatever experience they want. From a technical standpoint, there's a lot of stuff going on here. You can review it later, but I'll kind of talk about it. It's actually a little bit tricky because there's a few moving pieces. So you have your native app, which has all the native iOS and Android functionality. And so it's a platform with a certain set of APIs and features. Then inside of that native app, and so it has the UI of the whole app, whether it's like, here's where you type in your message, here's where you find your friends. But then it can create UI elements that when you tap them, it triggers a web view. And so the web view can be part of the screen, it can be all of the screen. That's very much up to the platform developer. In this case, the web view is part of the screen. It's the white part where it has OpenTable as a heading. In the gaming case, it's full screen. But inside that web view, you have the DOM, CSS, JavaScript, basically all of HTML5. Now, the first thing is there's a bridge between the native app and the web view. And that's what the platform developer provides. And it basically says, okay, this is a Facebook Messenger chat. So what is a logical way to interact with a chat? You need some kind of API to understand who are the members of this chat, some API to send messages back into the chat, things like that. And so that's up to Facebook to provide. And so what they do is they say, okay, we already have like an Objective-C implementation of that, like a way to say get all users in chat room, right? And they're already using it internally in their app because obviously they draw the screen with the members. And so the next step they take is how do we bind that to JavaScript and expose it into the web view? So when you run code inside of this web view, you run some JavaScript and you say, facebook.room.getMembers. It actually calls into Objective-C or Java, and then it goes and hits the Facebook data APIs, but it returns that result all the way back into JavaScript. So as an application developer, you have access to two types of APIs. You have the existing browser APIs that I mentioned, the CSS and the JavaScript and this stuff. You also have the platform-specific APIs. And so then outside of this box, that big box there with the kind of 4 smaller boxes, that's just like Facebook Messenger, or that's just Gmail. Outside is what you have to build. And there's two pieces. One is, actually no, I said it slightly wrong. There's the bottom two are what you have to build. So where it says third-party HTML5 application code, that's your code, your custom JavaScript that exists inside that web view. And it's being run by Facebook. And then it's going to reach out to your server because you need to store stuff like your own user accounts, or if you're a table booking website, you need your database of restaurants. And so your application code in JavaScript can interact with the web view APIs, it can interact with the native app APIs, and it can interact with the network APIs back to your server. Then your server, which is getting calls from the client, also can interact with the Facebook server or the Gmail server to do things in the back end, like verify the user identities and things like that. And so if you look at all the flows of like how information goes, it's actually a bit more complicated now because you have to use APIs provided by Chrome and Safari and Mozilla and like these teams to like put things on the screen. You have to use APIs provided by the specific like Messenger team or Gmail team to get access to the fundamental building blocks of the platform. Then you have to use network APIs in some server, whether it's running on top of Amazon or Google or something like that, in order to store and persist data. Then you need to use server-to-server APIs in order to interact between your server and like some arbitrary backend, usually over like REST or JSON or something like that. So the good news is that if you're an engineer, and a lot of people raise their hand, your job just became more in demand because there's more things to do to build an app. On the other hand, from a business standpoint, despite all of this complexity, if you can kind of get a team that's really good at this and get fast iteration cycles, you can build an experience faster than ever and better than ever with more users than ever on a smaller budget. So what does it mean, though, as this world matures? Actually, I'm going to go back one and I saw one confused look. Is there anyone who has any questions about this? It's kind of the meat of the architecture. I'll also ask for questions at the end so you can ponder it. So, if you want to exist in a business world over the next 10 years, the question is, how do we survive and grow as a business? And And that, of course, implies you have to think about this from a product standpoint. And the answer is that it comes down to intent. It's where are users and customers when they make some decision. Now, Google is kind of the first big tech company that ever answered this, where they said, oh, we have a search bar. And so what are people doing when they type into the search bar? They're sort of signaling their intent. They want to find a plumber. They want to research a new university. They want to buy a flight ticket. And so Google was able to say, okay, since we have that intent, let's make an ad platform and sell ads, and that turned out to be worth hundreds of billions of dollars. And so capturing a position in this intent chain where you have a customer at some point trying to do some action is critical. Now, the days of people opening a browser and typing in a Google search, it's not that they're over, but that's a pretty simple ecosystem. Whereas this is actually a much more complex ecosystem with a lot of players, And so if you think about it, something as simple as I want to get from point A to point B in the real world. I want to book a ride. The question is, how do I do that today? And in the App Store world, I would think, okay, if I want to go somewhere, I have Lyft on my home screen. I'm going to go find the Lyft app, or pull down and search for Lyft and pull it up. And then I'm going to put in my address, and I'm going to book my car and wait. And so that's today's world. But at the point where you can now embed the booking experience directly inside of other apps, for example, if you have Google Maps and you open up Google Maps, Lyft is now embedded inside Google Maps. And so when you search for an address, you can call Lyft right from Google Maps without even having to leave. I mean, eventually it takes you over to Lyft. But the point is, there are multiple ways now to think about when do I call that car. So one example is if I want to get a ride to my dinner party, like something goes off and someone calls me and says, hey, you're late. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm late. I just grab the Lyft app. It says surge pricing or something, whatever it says there. I don't care, like whatever price, get it to me because I'm late. I call it, I get in the car, I go. And then maybe it comes from a calendar reminder or something like that. Another one is I'm just bored. I'm in Facebook Messenger. I'm like, hey, does anyone want to hang out? And someone says, yeah, I do. And we say, oh, great, let's, I'll pick you up. And then there's a little Lyft button, and I book it right there from Facebook Messenger. Another is if I'm done with work. It's not like someone called me. It's not like I got a calendar invite. It's just like every single day when I'm done from work, I call a Lyft home, perhaps. Then I just open up from the home screen. But there are three different ways you can get there. One is from a calendar invite. One is from a messenger intent. And one is from just thinking I need to go on the home screen and call the ride. Now, in the old days, there was no question about this. There's an app on the home screen, and it's always like that. 100% of rides are because you open up the app from the home screen. But now it's not like that. It's like, okay, Lyft is a company. Are they an app company? Or are they a ride providing company, ride sharing? I don't know what they're called exactly, but an on-demand transportation company. And the answer is, yeah, they are an on-demand transportation company, and what matters is how they get you the moment you think I want to go somewhere. And so if they fail to integrate into Messenger, they're going to lose all of the people who are just like making their plans that moment. If they fail to integrate into Google Calendar, they're going to lose that chance where if all I see when I get a calendar invite, calendar notification, hey, you have to leave right now to make it to your meeting on time, tap here to get an Uber, I'm just going to tap to get the Uber, and there won't be a Lyft option, and then Lyft will probably lose that market share. So Lyft has to be in all of these different places. They have to be ubiquitous. They have to capture the user at all these different points in the value chain. And so the question, though, is, okay, but what does that mean for the future of your home screen? Will you even have a ride-sharing app? For example, will I open up Google Maps only to decide where I want to go? Because Google Maps has Lyft, and it has Grab, and it has Uber. So like, why open any of those when I can just open Google Maps? And the answer is, I don't know. Maybe that will be how all people call their rides, or maybe there's something interesting about having a ride-sharing app on your home screen that is somehow better. Another question is, will you have an e-commerce app? Will you have like a Rakuten e-commerce app? Or will you have a chatbot? If people say, hey, I want to book, I want to buy something, maybe they want to just chat to sort of an AI and say, hey, I'm really looking to figure out how I can buy a present for my in-laws over Christmas. And they like that experience better than actually going and searching in an app. It's very, very unclear, but the point is you have to be there when someone has that intent that they want to sell something. So it means you have to build a little chatbot or build an experience inside of a messenger, just as much as you have to run the actual e-commerce operations. Another one is the App Store versus a messenger. Will people say, I wish I had a game on my phone, and then go to the App Store and read all the games, or will they just be inside Messenger and be like, oh, here's a game I can play with my friends? And of course, that's the bet that Blackstorm is making, is that there will be a shift from the App Store into Messenger. Another question is, it's like travel booking versus AI assistant. It feels to me always like booking some trip is the thing that should be easy and repeatable, and some AI should be able to do. It has known, all these known pieces. And will it just be something through a messenger, or will I still want to go and compare my big grid of different flights and all the different, what type of aircraft is this and everything else? I don't really know, but answering this question, on the one hand, it seems very important because, like, do you want to go build the e-commerce app or do you want to go build the e-commerce chat experience with HTML5? It's a good question. But the answer is that it might not actually matter because whether, let me explain. It won't matter if you find your users from a chatbot or you find your users from the home screen. It doesn't really matter at all. What matters is that you find your users. That's all that matters. And so the question in the future, will you be an app company or will you be a chat company, or an embedded widget inside a calendar company? It really, really, really doesn't matter. There will be a consolidation on the home screen. There will be fewer things on the home screen. Ride sharing may disappear entirely as an app on your home screen. Nobody maybe will ever tap Lyft. But that's fine. Because as long as Lyft keeps providing rides and as long as Lyft keeps finding their customers from the calendar invites or from the map or from the messenger, then they can still be a huge company and be very, very, very successful. And so users, they're not going to be thinking about that this way. They just expect your service to be omnipresent. They expect you to be available everywhere where they think, I want to do this thing, and then there's your service. And so it doesn't really matter where it comes from, but what does matter is that you are in all of these platforms. If you miss that, then someone else will be that omnipresent app and that service and will sort of be the winner. And so I'm going to make a few predictions. I think ride sharing will remain a home screen category, like Lyft or Uber. But I think more than half the rides will actually be booked through a different source. And these are predictions for the next 10 years. So you can call me in 10 years and say you were wrong. It's fine. I think there'll be a huge clash between e-commerce and kind of the app within an app model, where is it that we go to Rakuten.com or download a Rakuten app, or do we go inside of Viber and directly buy things that way? I think there's sort of this coming sort of tension between the two, and it'll be very, very interesting to see how it plays out. I think by 2025, there will be multiple startups that go from 0 to 1 billion users in less than a month. And this sounds like a crazy prediction to go from 0 to 1 billion users in a month, but the numbers we're already seeing on our game with no marketing budget, we haven't yet hit the 100 million user mark in under a year, but we're getting really, really, really close, and we'll likely hit it by the end of this year. So if you think about that, zero marketing, we just did our first kind of prototype game on this new ecosystem, we've grown that quickly. As this matures and as these platforms come out, and it's not just Facebook Messenger, but it's also Facebook and it's Instagram and it's Line and it's WeChat and it's Gmail and it's Snapchat and all of these different apps, you'll have startups that launch across these different categories and they go through really, really quick growth, which also implies all the backend services and things like that. We need to be able to scale up just as quickly. So I want to take time now for any questions. I know this is sort of a mix between tech and business, but what I'm hoping that I painted for you is a picture of sort of where the world on mobile is going. It's not the traditional one where I'm talking about the next iOS update, this one little SDK feature. I'm actually talking about a pretty big shift. But I think everyone here, if you go and take a look and you actually look at these apps, you look at the Facebook Instant Games, you look at the Gmail platform, you look at the WeChat mini programs, you'll see the start of this happening right now. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Thank you very much. Question?
Yep. Thank you very Thank you for the very insightful talk. My question is about the developing apps in game industry based on HTML5 because of the execution speed. In case of HTML5 could be quite slow for game industry, and I'd like to have your opinion about that.
Yeah, so the question is about how can you make the game feel like a great, smooth, fun experience, given that you're running inside of JavaScript in a web browser, as opposed to some bare metal GPU, C++, maybe some assembly or something like that. And these are seemingly dramatically different runtime environments. Now, the sort of simple answer I'm going to start with is open up Messenger. And go to the gaming section and play our game, play Everwing, and just feel what it's like on a modern device. And so that's kind of a visceral response. It's actually a really smooth game. It's really fun. It is 2D. It's not 3D. We decided to go with a 2D sprite-based system. But what we did do is we set it up so that all of our animations and all of our rendering happens right on the GPU. And so even though JavaScript is used to sort of compose the scene, it's actually the GPU ticking that's able to put these on and create those animation layers. And it works really, really well. Now, more broadly though, you cannot take a Unity game and sort of compile it into a JavaScript runtime. I mean, you technically can, but it's terrible. It doesn't really work. And so there's kind of like a polygon limit. But that is increasing with every single release. And what you can do today is like 1,000 times better than just a couple of years ago. And so the way I think this goes is that all of the games that are like 2D games that are really great games can all be done today in HTML5, no problem. So we're talking in Japan like Disney's Tsum Tsum, or Poco Pong, or like Line Rangers, or there's a lot of these kind of existing messenger games. And I mean, you could do is it Puzzles and Dragons? Puzzles and Dragon? I don't know which one's plural, but you could do that game entirely in HTML5, no problem. And these are games that make billions of dollars, all of them. They make billions of dollars, right? So there's definitely a way to do it today. In terms of building like a super hardcore 3D first-person shooter, it's still a couple years out. The last thing I'll say, though, from a technical standpoint, is that we have all of these new APIs that allow you, starting with the original like ASM.js, through like WebAssembly and the rest. We have this ability now for JavaScript to reach through multiple layers and directly affect like CPU execution instructions and directly affect the GPU. And so JavaScript itself is getting shockingly fast, and it has these amazing just-in-time compilers. And it's to the point where I'm seeing a lot of benchmarks for basic things, like here if you write like a factorial program in C++, and you write this like factorial program in JavaScript, it's only off by a factor of like 2, not like 20. And so if you're half as fast instead of like 1% as fast, that's a really big difference, and that gap is starting to close.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael, I had a question. So with this new like app-in-app ecosystem, how does that affect like data? So if Lyft is pulling from the home screen, of course they're getting membership, they're getting all that stuff. So how are they going to have great partnerships with Facebook or whatever?
Yeah. So the question is, does Lyft have their own user accounts versus are they getting some partnership done with Facebook? It's more general though. It's like, who really controls the user data? And I would answer that question first by saying, how does it work right now? I buy an iPhone, and so Apple kind of owns this user relationship with me. I have a iCloud account or whatever it is, and they have my credit card and they have my details. And then I install Lyft. And now Lyft has its own way of then logging in and then somehow collecting payments, and so they kind of collect some duplicate data. And perhaps there's some overlap, right? Perhaps they use Apple Pay, so they don't have to collect my credit card, or perhaps they use in-app purchases, or something like that. And perhaps they don't. Perhaps they just have me type my credit card directly. But the point is, there are some kind of duplicate efforts. That's okay. When it comes down to something like Facebook, though, if I'm building a game on Facebook, in the world of gaming, the hardest part is there's a lot of hardest parts, but one of the hardest parts is the user acquisition. And if I get a first user to come and try my app, holding on to them to actually get them through the part where they try out the tutorial and they're playing the game is really tough. And so the friction of saying, hey, before you play, and this is something that a lot of Japanese games unfortunately do, it's like these big screens right in the beginning. It's like, what's your full name, what's your date of birth, let's log you in, let's register you, create all these different accounts. Now that you did that, they say, please go connect back to Line anyway. And so then I switch apps to Line, I authorize, I switch back. And so there's this big kind of upfront hurdle. Now, in the world of instant games, you have users who within 1 second go from chatting to playing a game. And so by removing all that friction, the last thing you want to do is add it back in by then having all these sign-up forms. And so it's worthwhile just to use the Facebook Connect API. Just say, look, Facebook already provides the user information right there. Now, what we do is we actually have a game-specific user ID that Facebook provides us that lets us uniquely identify our users. Then we upload those to our server. So we have a server that has sort of a set of data that tells us which user is playing in which chat rooms and how they're connected to other users. And that's data that's on our server. And yet we can still reach out and use the Facebook APIs for authentication, payment, things like that. And so I think just there's going to be a continued acceleration of the trend you're already seeing, which is that there's a bunch of overlapping services. And some things you're going to have to redo yourself, and other things you just use what's there. And I think more and more and more, it's going to be whatever is the least friction. If Lyft can ultimately get someone in a car and drive them from point A to B, like that's the business. And like having people fill out an email in a login form is not really the business.
Makes sense. How much time do we have? 1 minute. Okay. Take 2 more questions. Yeah.
Hi. We have many JavaScript framework in the library today, like React, Angular 1, Angular 2, Vue.js, stuff like that. So in the new app within app ecosystem, do you think any of this framework have more advantages, or do you think there's going to be like some more new libraries?
So there's a really huge ecosystem out there. From personal preference, I really like React.js a lot. I think the model they've used and where they've gone is just really amazing. I built an app in a hackathon over a weekend, and it was super easy. That said, though, fundamentally, if you zoom out a little bit and you look at like Angular 1 or Angular 2 or Vue.js or React, they're kind of all similar. And I'm trying to create like a holy war here, but they kind of all fill a similar need. The thing that I think you got to figure out is how you interface the UI and the UX of the app into the app within an app. They have to be a clean experience. And I think the libraries and frameworks that give you the best ability to have a flexible UI and to iterate really quickly and to adjust it slightly on Android versus the web versus iOS, I think those will be the winners. In gaming, we sort of avoid this problem because you just have WebGL and you have to build it all. And so we built our own game engine that kind of handled all those problems. But if I were starting over from scratch, I'd probably build a UI system on top of React. Would be my choice.
Okay. One more question. Just real quick one.
Yeah. So how are these HTML5 apps different from Google's Instant app, which they were just released?
So from a business case, Google has recognized generally that when you don't have to make someone go to some app store, read through some stuff, download a 200 megabyte app, install it, register, when you can skip all that process, you have a really efficient distribution, and it's strictly better for users, it's better for businesses, it's better for humanity. And so they looked at that and said, oh, that's great. Is there some way that we can take existing Android apps and make them more available more instantly? So from a business standpoint, Google Instant Apps is an attempt to take the existing technology and kind of shoehorn it into this new distribution model. From a technology perspective, it's completely different. It's Android only. You're writing in Java. Whereas with HTML5 instant apps, you're building the whole app in a way that can be loaded instantly, as opposed to just sort of streamed from a UI standpoint. I personally think that instant apps, since they're not cross-platform, it's not really standard. I think they'll struggle, but I actually really like that Google realizes that this is sort of the future. And I hope they find ways to let instant apps integrate with each other to create more of an ecosystem.
All right, so that's all the time we have, so a round of applause for Michael. All right, thank you very much. We have another presentation in about 15 minutes.